In this video, we're going to start actually installing new things on the bike. But first, one step I forgot to show in the last video about removing the headset, which is removing the crown race from the fork. As you can see, there's a little tab here, and some forks will have two, that makes it easier to pry it up. From there, it's just keep prying until it comes off. Now it's time to install the dropper. This frame already has one installed, but when I said I wanted to build a bike from the ground up, I meant it, so we'll be removing this one and installing a PNW Rainier in its place. The Meta TR frame has a removable plastic protector that gives access to a hole in the frame to make threading cables easier, so I'm taking that off and removing the existing dropper lever. Since this frame has a post installed, there's already cable and housing routed. I don't want to use the old housing or the old cable, but I do want to see if I can use them to make threading the new stuff easier. First, I tried linking the old and new housing up using some electrical tape. Old, bad electrical tape. This went about as well as you'd expect, which is to say, it didn't work. Next, I spent a while trying to thread the housing through manually. But with the current cable and housing in place and bolts in the seat tube that are tough to navigate around, this was basically impossible. I got a cheap magnetic cable fishing tool from Amazon and tried that, but that didn't work either. Now, both of these things probably would have worked better if I'd removed the existing housing, but I didn't want to do that as I still thought it could be used to thread the new cable through if I could find a better way to connect the old and new housing, which is ultimately what I did. I found some better electrical tape and cut it into thin strips, wrapping carefully to link the old and new housing ends, and then giving it a few good pulls to make sure it wouldn't separate before I actually tried threading it into the bike. Oh. Mercifully, that worked. And with the difficult part of the frame threaded, all I had to do was thread the housing up through the down tube and slide on some foam housing wrapper that should keep it from banging around as I ride. I put end caps on both ends of the cables, although I'll be cutting one end of the housing later once I've got the bars installed. Next, it's on to the dropper. A dropper post should come with this little piece, which threads over the cable and sits on the end, giving it a nice, neat fit into the bottom of the dropper. This is what it looks like. Now I'm greasing up the post. If your frame is carbon, you might need carbon paste instead for this step. Then it's time to thread the cable through the housing and connect the dropper, seating the housing and cable ends correctly into the bottom of the post. Note that as I'm pushing it into the frame, I'm gently pulling on the other end of the cable to maintain a small amount of tension where the cable's attached to the post, just so it doesn't come unattached. Torque your seat post clamp to spec, reattach the bottom cover, and you're good to go. At least until you install the dropper lever, which we're going to do in a future video. I still had a couple of extra steps though. First, I got the washer that the frame was missing from Commensal, so I installed that. I also decided after doing all of this that I wanted to change the seat clamp. But this was kind of risky because I could have lost the cable and had difficulty re-threading it into the housing. In the end, the way I did this was pretty awkward, but it did work, and I was able to get the new clamp on without ruining anything. Obviously though, I don't recommend this approach. It's definitely much easier to install the seat clamp before even beginning with the dropper install. Well, that's it for this one. In the next video, we'll be installing the new headset, fork, and stem. Until then, I hope you get a chance to get outside and ride, and I'll see you in the next one.